In 1945, over 1 million black Americans helped defeat the Nazis. They watched Hitler's death camps get liberated. They saw what happens when a government decides some people are less than human. Then they came home. And within months, some of them would be beaten. Some would be blinded. Some would be lynched. Not by enemy soldiers, by their own countrymen. This is the story of the 5 worst ways America betrayed the men who saved it. During the war, something remarkable happened. With white men overseas, factories desperately needed workers. For the first time, black Americans got hired for skilled positions: welders, machinists, supervisors. The defense industry paid real wages. By 1945, black workers had gained a foothold in America's industrial economy. Then the soldiers came home. White veterans wanted their jobs back, and employers were happy to give them, even jobs that black workers had been doing successfully for years. The GI Bill promised unemployment benefits to ease the transition. But here's what happened when black veterans tried to claim them. In the South, if you were offered any job, even one paying below subsistence wages, and you turned it down, the VA would terminate your benefits. Postmasters in some areas refused to even deliver the forms black veterans needed to apply. A National Urban League study put it bluntly: benefits were administered as though the legislation were earmarked for white veterans only. The men who'd built the tanks and planes that won the war were pushed back to the lowest rungs of the economy. The wartime gains evaporated. But that was just the beginning. The GI Bill offered something revolutionary: free college for every veteran. For the first time, higher education wasn't just for the wealthy. White veterans flooded into universities. By 1947, half of all college students were veterans on the GI Bill. But when black veterans tried to enroll, northern universities dragged their feet. Southern universities refused outright. The VA itself steered black veterans away from degree programs. Have you considered vocational training instead? The result? While 28% of white veterans attended college on the GI Bill, only 12% of black veterans did. And 90% of those were funneled into historically black colleges, institutions that were already underfunded and now dangerously overcrowded. Tens of thousands of qualified black veterans were simply turned away. There weren't enough seats. Take Sergeant Joseph Maddox. He applied to Harvard. He was accepted. When he went to his local VA office for financial assistance, they denied him. The reason? They didn't want to set a precedent of black men attending Harvard. The GI Bill created the American middle class. It built generational wealth that families still benefit from today. Black veterans were locked out, and their descendants are still paying the price. After the war, America built the suburbs, millions of new homes. The GI Bill guaranteed mortgages so veterans could afford them. This was the birth of the American dream. Eugene Burnett was a veteran. In 1949, he saw the neat houses of Levittown, New York, and knew he wanted one. He had served his country. He had the GI Bill. He had the money. He approached a salesman, and the door slammed in his face. Levittown didn't sell to black families. This wasn't a local problem. The Federal Housing Administration had official policies. They called it redlining, that rated black neighborhoods as high risk and white neighborhoods as safe investments. Banks wouldn't lend. Realtors wouldn't show homes. And even if a black veteran found a willing seller, white mobs sometimes had the final say. In 1947, when black veterans tried to move into a Chicago housing development, a crowd threw rocks at them. Here's a number that tells the whole story. In 1947, Ebony magazine surveyed 13 cities in Mississippi. Of 3,229 VA-backed home loans issued to veterans, exactly 2 went to black borrowers. 2. In New York and northern New Jersey combined, fewer than 100 of 67,000 GI Bill mortgages went to non-white veterans. White veterans bought homes that appreciated for decades. They passed that wealth to their children, who bought bigger homes. That's how generational wealth works. Black veterans? They stayed in red-lined neighborhoods where property values stagnated or declined. The wealth gap we're still talking about today, a lot of it traces back to these exact policies. For white America, the uniform symbolized sacrifice and honor. When a white soldier walked down the street in his dress uniform, people thanked him. For black veterans in the South, that same uniform was a provocation. Senator James Vardaman of Mississippi warned what would happen if black soldiers were allowed to see themselves as American heroes. It would be, he said, but a short step to the conclusion that their political rights must be respected. He meant that as a threat. Black veterans coming home learned quickly. The medals on your chest didn't protect you. They made you a target. Some were stopped on the street, demanded to remove their uniforms. Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative documented what happened next. Many of them would be asked to take off their uniforms and walk home in their underwear, naked, in some optic of humiliation. And they would resist. And there would be conflict, and there would be violence. Hosea Williams had been captured by the German army. He earned a Purple Heart for wounds suffered fighting Nazis in Europe. On his way home to Georgia, still in uniform, he tried to drink from a water fountain. A white mob beat him so badly they assumed he was dead. They called a black funeral home to pick up the body. He survived, barely. Years later, he would help lead civil rights protesters across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. 19-year-old J.C. Farmer made it home from the war. In 1946, he was standing at a bus stop in North Carolina, laughing with a friend. A police officer took offense. Within hours, a mob had shot him dead for laughing. What I'm about to describe is the worst way black veterans were treated after World War II. And it wasn't rare. The Equal Justice Initiative documented that between the end of Reconstruction and World War II, thousands of black veterans were attacked. Dozens were lynched. But 1946, the year after victory, was different. That year became known as that terrible summer. February 12, 1946. Sergeant Isaac Woodard had just been honorably discharged from the Army. He'd served in the Pacific Theater. He had medals on his chest. He was on a Greyhound bus heading home to South Carolina when he asked the driver to stop so he could use the restroom. The driver cursed at him. Woodard responded, "Talk to me like I'm talking to you. I'm a man just like you." At the next stop, the driver called the police. What happened next? I need you to understand the police officer who did this admitted to it in court. Chief Linwood Shull and his officers dragged Sergeant Woodard off the bus. They beat him with nightsticks. Then Scholl took the end of his billy club and gouged out Woodard's eyes. Isaac Woodard woke up the next morning blind. He would never see again. The federal government actually prosecuted Scholl. At trial, he admitted he'd blinded Woodard. His lawyer told the all-white jury, "If you rule against Scholl, then let this South Carolina secede again." The jury deliberated for 30 minutes. Not guilty. The courtroom broke into applause. 5 months later, July 1946, Georgia. George Dorsey was a World War II veteran who'd served in North Africa and the Pacific. He was back home, working as a sharecropper. A mob dragged him from a car along with his wife, his sister, and his brother-in-law. They shot all 4 of them, over 60 times. George Dorsey's wife was reportedly 7 months pregnant. No one has ever been charged. Just days earlier in the next county, another veteran named Maceo Snipes had done something dangerous. He voted. He was the first black man to vote in Taylor County, Georgia. The Klan had threatened violence against anyone who tried. The day after the election, 4 white men drove up to his house, called him onto the porch, and shot him. He bled out in a hospital that claimed they had no black blood for a transfusion. 56 black Americans were killed in the first 15 months after Hitler's defeat. Many were veterans. Many were still wearing their uniforms. The blinding of Isaac Woodard was so horrific that it reached President Truman. He was outraged. It led directly to Executive Order 9981, the desegregation of the U.S. military in 1948. Today, there's legislation in Congress, the GI Bill Restoration Act, that would extend housing and education benefits to the descendants of black veterans who were denied them. Because these weren't just historical wrongs. They created structural disadvantages that compound across generations. Over 1 million black Americans helped defeat fascism abroad. When they came home, many of them joined another fight. Men like Hosea Williams and Medgar Evers, both veterans, became leaders of the civil rights movement. They'd proven something to themselves overseas. They'd tasted equality in France and England. They'd seen that it was possible, and they refused to accept anything less at home.